And welcome back. We're here at Miami's Community News. I'm joined by retired police chief David Magnusson. How are you, David?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, man, I'm doing great.
Great.
We're here to talk about a very important topic, which is the silent struggle. How many of you struggle with stress, anxiety, or worse, mental health or substance abuse? Well, we're talking from a little bit of our experience, law enforcement. And David, you have some stats, man. Let's go into this because we're going to be building out a series. We're going to be speaking to a lot of stakeholders, public sector workers, community stakeholders about this issue, about seeking proactive care and also resources available to you. David, what do you have to say?
Thanks, Robert. Proactivity is probably the key here. You just touched upon it. Proactivity. We are very proactive when we come down with something, when we get sick, we get the flu, we take care of ourselves. We want to get better, right? Get an injury, you go to a chiropractor, if you tweak a back, we're proactive. Not so much when it comes to some struggles that we may be fighting within that we know about, but we're not looking for that proper assistance. So on some of the statistics, you're talking 1 out of 4 people in this country, and I'm talking about the population as a whole. Now, police, law enforcement, first responders are a microcosm of the community, and nobody should lose sight of that. But there's 2 sets of stats. Here, 1 out of 4 people in the U.S. experience mental illness each year. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for people from 10 to 14. Think about that. Think about our children. 5.5% of adults experience serious mental illness in 2021. I mean, the numbers, you can go down these numbers, and the farther down you go, the more you're concerned because you say, this is a problem. Now, you shift over to the law enforcement and you go, 47.2% of adults with mental illness receive treatment. That's good. Would you think that law enforcement professionals, you think it's as high as 47.2% as part of the overall general? Probably not. I've been in law enforcement a long time, retired now, but
How many years in law enforcement, Dave?
36 and a half. I did 30 with the city of Miami, best department in the country. And I think Chief Morales will agree with that in a few seconds. I went over to Havelock, North Carolina, home of Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point, was chief there. Then came back to El Portel and ran the department there for close to 3 years. But when you're looking at the police, they're in that silent struggle. They're in a constant state of hypervigilance. Yeah. That stress level lasts a lot longer than in other professions. The alcohol abuse is double that of the general population, and suicide takes more officers' lives than gunshot wounds and auto accidents.
Wow. So let's pause there real quick so we can bring in our guest. We had the honor, somebody you work very closely with. Would
Correct.
You like to introduce our new guest?
Certainly. It is an honor and a privilege, not just a colleague, but a friend, Chief Manny Morales of the Miami Police Department. And I certainly appreciate him being here. And I'm sure he's going to delve on a couple issues, but I will explain later why I'm saluting him so much for something else of his leadership beyond his normal leadership that
he
he
just did something that was really badass.
It was pretty damn good. And he's going to explain it. Yes. Without further ado, Chief. Welcome.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing well.
Thank you for the gentleman, sir.
Yeah, he must not know us.
Always respect. Always respect. It's
you.
great to be with you folks here today.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Chief.
So, Dave, like you did with the city of Miami, I'm beginning my 30th year. An incredible place. This is my family, a place that has seen me grow up and rise through the ranks to chief, almost going on 2 years now. It's an incredible honor to lead the brave men and women of the Miami Police Department. And what you will agree with me is one of the finest, if not the finest, law enforcement agency in our nation, if not the world. So it's great to be here. And we know that our number one priority is to protect our community, keep them safe, reduce gun violence. But in order to do that, it's important for us to keep our men and women healthy, to keep our men and women sharp and ready to do the job that they're called to do each and every day. So I'm looking forward to this conversation here today.
Hey, Chief, one more thing. You came on the department in 1994, right?
94, yeah.
I came on in 90. I came into police work 89, 90. I think I remember you in the gang unit. Was it MAGTF? Did you participate in MAGTF, right?
It was MacDaff in the early 2000s. I was a gang lieutenant there for a little bit, from '08 to around '09, right around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before that, I want to bring something out. You were in the military, our U.S. Army. You were an officer. Thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, it's always been my dream to be a police officer and serve my community in some capacity. When I graduated high school, I was a little too young. Education at the time, I didn't see the incredible value of higher education at the time. So, being 17 years old, I joined the United States Army and did 4 years as a military police officer, and was able to participate in several nice deployments. I did Hurricane Hugh in 1989 when we went to St. Croix and helped the good folks down there, and when Panama, and we took down General Noriega in 1990. We were over there, and then subsequently Desert Storm and Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So I had quite a fun time, but I let that time go by, and I followed my true passion, which was coming back to my community, where I grew up, and I spent the best years of my life and serve the community and keep my family safe.
So, from a fellow military person, I was also in the U.S. Army. Thank you, brother.
Cool.
David, so let's get into it. A lot of trauma, right? You've seen a lot of trauma a lot of critical incidents in your career. I'm sure you have. You can draw parallels between being not just a command staff officer, but also being on these streets of Miami through the 90s, 80s, and 90s, and then moving on to become chief of police, which, whether it's a small agency, a large agency, how's the stress?
Well, then, the stress is always there. As you move up the ranks, and I'm sure Chief Morales will attest to that, it becomes something of a vicarious stress too. It's like your children, for lack of a better word. If something happens to them, you're in a constant state of concern. I mean, I worked some of the, as did the chief, some of the roughest areas, robbery, narcotics, jump out, all the fun units that keep you up. If you get a call in the middle of the night, it isn't because there's a plumbing issue. It's rough units. As you move up the ranks too, you're not only being affected, but you're being affected by what others are going through.
Yeah.
And in police work, even at the same rank, if something bad happens to or there's an issue with a colleague, it affects you. So there is that vicarious component to police work beyond the normal stress that you're feeling every day. And as you do go up the ranks, and I think Chief Morales alluded to this on an interview he did with Jim DeFede a while back, is that it gets to you as well. It's stressful. The job is stressful. And then you see things that even on your best day, even if it didn't affect you per se, you're seeing things that nobody should really have to see. It could be the harming of children. It could be even in a bad area where there's not so good a guy that gets gunned down. Oh, and that's horrific in itself. But then you're seeing family members come out, and to disassociate and not have any feeling, that's kind of rough. I mean, you don't want to ever lose that human touch.
I'm sorry, I can't help but to address the elephant in the room, right? We just recently saw in our law enforcement community, one of our fellow officers, command level, attempted suicide. That's Freddie Ramirez. And we don't necessarily need to go into that issue or the circumstances behind why things occurred the way they did. But Chief, you were courageous enough shortly after that, and you went on TV, and that's what David was speaking about with Jim DeFedes, and you spoke about your personal proactive work and your personal struggles. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we'd like to get into that. That is the purpose of the series. Sharing stories, addressing the issues, and then hopefully seeking solutions.
Robert, absolutely. I think that most individuals that have been in law enforcement some period of time will tell you how our profession has evolved. I think that's the only way that we can kind of describe it. I mean, initially, when we first began in policing many years ago, it was a very male-dominated, very type A, take charge kind of atmosphere where you'd never let your emotions out, right? You never let them see you hurt. And I think many cops paid the price for that, having that type of mentality. And as we progress and we've gotten smarter, we're listening to data, we're partnering with academics, and we've kind of realized that, as Dave said, as a police officer, you see things and you hear things that human beings shouldn't be exposed to. And we see this on a daily basis. The worst that humanity has to offer. Nobody calls the police when they're having a good time. Nobody calls the police to come and join them for a party. It's always when you're having a family dispute, when you're having a horrific event, people are getting shot, people are getting robbed. You see the worst humanity has to offer day in and day out. But that kind of has an impact on you, along with the you know the dump of excitement, the adrenaline that rushes through your body up and down, right, as your body's going on. So not only do we have to be mindful of heart disease, which is the number one killer of police, only second by suicides and car accidents, but we have to diagnose ourselves and be aware of the stress that we're under every day. Myself, and Dave will attest to it as well, as you race through the ranks, and he said it, you don't see the horror every day, but you're responding to the scene day after day, and you're backing up your officers, and you feel what they're going through. You feel the stress that they're under. And one of the things that I've done, and I've never been shy about it, is seek help. And I do a routine monthly appointment with my therapist, just to kind of debrief, to make sure that my mind is in good working order. Right. And that's what keeps me sane. That's what keeps me grounded. So one of the things that I'm instituting in the police department is to have mandatory therapy sessions for all our officers. We mandate right now physical examinations every year. You got to go to the doctor, check your heart, your blood pressure, do your blood work. Right. So why can't we pay in the same amount of attention and put the same emphasis on mental health as we do on physical health? So I'm looking forward to it. And even though folks might be resistant at first, my hope is once they sit down with a therapist and they open up and talk about their issues, that they might continue to seek that help on a continuous basis.
Admirable. You know, and it's not just law enforcement or first responders or public sector workers that are experiencing struggles, right? When was it? The day before yesterday or a couple days before that, we saw Todd Booth,
yeah,
up in Miramar, in the middle of intersection, climbed on top of a fire rescue truck.
Correct.
And held the law officers at bay for quite a few hours. And that was a person in crisis.
But there's something to be said about that. And here where I'm going with this. Years ago, he wouldn't have been dancing on that truck for too long. Yeah. What's changed in law enforcement is the way how to handle and deal with a person in that sort of crisis. He's not hurting anybody. He came down. There were no issues afterwards. He's going to get the help he needs. But if that can change, if the philosophy in law enforcement can change for that, body cameras at the beginning, I'm not wearing a body cam. Now it's everybody's best friend because there's a safeguard to it. One more safeguard. Why can't we change the mindset to proactively? Because I'm telling you, around law enforcement, they're a skeptical bunch. It's going to take a while. It's going to take leadership like Chief Morales, to lead from the top and say, this is not a bad thing. And I'm sure there's some that do it. They're not going to talk about it, but they do it. But get to a point where you do talk about it. Yeah, I'm going to see Dr. So-and-so. I'm going, this is the greatest thing. I'm even going through hypnosis. This is wonderful. It's relaxing. Whatever the case is, to change that paradigm where people are saying, dragging in, because right now to get the physical, nobody's hemming and hawing, especially as you get older. Yeah. They want to get that stress test because they want to see, let me see how I'm doing, because I hear horror stories sometimes of officers right when they retire. And I'll add a caveat to that. There's even greater issues for officers that retire than for active law enforcement. That's a discussion for a little later, perhaps.
That's another topic.
That's another topic. Series, but get to a point where people want to do it, where they look forward to. Nobody's now in the police work is saying, doggone it, I got to go for a stress test. No, you want to see, because you can't see what's inside you. You can't see what's in here. You may know what you're feeling, but you got to be able to express it. So again, kudos for the leadership of Chief Morales.
So Chief, do you see more receptiveness, officers receiving this well? I know when I came on, as the chief mentioned, I mean, we had a shootout and it was suck it up and come back to work and, life goes on. But do you see, and we never talked about it, you spoke about that, but do you see a change now in mindsets?
Robert, I do. And remember, confidentiality is key, right? Our officers are not going to seek the assistance they need if they feel like Big Brother's watching. So one of the things that we do is that it's completely anonymous. When we get billed by our employee assistance program and the therapists that give psychological services to our men and women, they bill us for numbers of hours, right? So we don't know how many folks go. We don't know who went, what was discussed. The only requirement that have is was mandated by law that if they're express any type of feeling or desire to hurt themselves or other, they're a mandated reporter, so they have to disclose that. However, everything else remains confidential. So as we get billed, I see the increased number of hours, so I know these folks are going out there. And as I speak to the professionals that give our men and women the help they need, I know that more folks are seeking it, right? The younger guys and the younger gals are more willing to accept this help, right? It doesn't seem taboo to them, which is where we're trying to head, right? So, and I'm glad to hear when I have a candid conversation with my therapist that he's telling me that the folks that are seeking the additional hours of therapy are first line supervisors, right? So this young sergeants that are out there each and every day that are kind of living vicariously through their officers are seeking the help to be able to deal with the problems that policing brings each and every day.
Yeah. And likewise, like you mentioned earlier at the beginning, I'm sorry to jump in here, Dave,
Please.
but you said something that was really, really important. And I, as leaders, I like to hear leaders say what you just said earlier, which was, we can't serve the community unless our officers are doing well. You're taking care of your cops, and that's really, really important. But do you see an increase of calls for service? I know that you're in the administrative side, but do you hear or see any evidence of increase of calls for service? People enduring stress, people struggling with crisis, either mental illness or substance abuse, as civilians.
So we have one of the things that we did early on in my administration is we created a crisis intervention module, right? One of the things that I was very cognizant is are we taking care of our officers not only mentally and physically, but are we taking proactive steps to make sure that we're avoiding putting them in situations that might bring adverse actions to them, right? So one of the things we did is we put a CIT module, the crisis intervention team module, which identified every time an officer responded to a call for mental crisis. So what that information gives us is if we know that we're going to a location multiple times to deal with an individual in mental crisis, we should take proactive steps. We should make sure that we check up on that individual before the calls go out, right? To make sure that he's getting the treatment that he needs, that he's staying on his medications, that he's visiting a professional, right? Let's not wait for the time in which he's in mental crisis, which is beyond any type of services, and have a police encounter. So like that, we try to avoid putting our cops in dangerous situations. So I have seen an increase in the calls for service when it involves individuals in mental crisis. So I know our community is being impacted the same way our officers are, but that's only normal because remember, our police force is just a small segment of our community. We are the community we serve. We come from the community we serve, right? That's why we're effective, because we match the community that we're trying to protect.
We also just came out of a once in a century pandemic, which put, although now you can look back during the middle of it, you're in the cloud, you really can't see it until you break through and look back down. What the psychologists are saying from the children on up, the effect that the pandemic had. You can also translate that into law enforcement. When I talk vicarious, more officers died over that 2-year period from COVID than they did from gunshot wounds and or traffic accidents. But you still had an officer dying.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects the other officers around. And some agencies had it more than once, where a number of officers over the course of the pandemic. That takes effect. That's one of those things where I talked about vicarious earlier. It's some people lost a close friend. It doesn't matter how it happens. This is what happened, and certainly it wasn't expected. And there's a certain sadness, a pall that hangs over. Well, this pall hung over all of society for maybe 2.5 years.
Global.
And so, you're seeing it now. There's a couple things that are a little bit askew that haven't gotten back into form yet. going back with also helping, and I use this in a lot of when I teach some other courses, in helping somebody, helping yourself first. If you ever flew, especially as a young kid, you're listening to the steward to say, to the parents, here, put the mask on first. I'm saying, well, what about me? I'm a kid, right? As you get older, you realize it. You can't help anybody that needs to help more if you don't help yourself first. I think the chief alluded to that. Take care of yourself first, and then you have, the ways and means of helping others. And that was a really interesting statistic, first line supervisors, because that's the toughest rank of all. When you leave from officer to sergeant, to me, and I think I've heard it before from others, that is the biggest transition. Even when I went up to staff, the biggest transition was officer to sergeant, because now you're responsible for everybody. And if you're worth your weight in salt, you'll keep an eye on everybody and make sure they're doing great. And so you got to be at your best. And so that was a very promising information that the chief brought out.
So I want to pause here for a second. We have 5 minutes left, and I want to start wrapping this thing up. But because whereas we wrap this episode up, it's certainly not the end. Chief, I will ask you, David and I will ask you, we'd like to continue to monitor what the city of Miami, the proactive work that the city of Miami is working on in this arena as it serves the community. If anyone that's out there looking at this, viewing this show, is struggling with anxiety, ideations, just silent struggle, you're not alone. Dial 988. It's a good resource. Talk to someone. Get the information out. We will be speaking with Judge Leifman. He is the pioneer in Miami-Dade County, probably part of the country, great part of the country when it comes to critical incident training and crisis management. Chief, what parting words do you have for the community for now? Because I would like you to come back on and be part of this series, the evolution of this series. What words can you share with the community you serve to give them a better understanding that they're not alone? Did we lose the chief? I think we just lost the chief. We'll turn it over to you, Chief.
Well, from one chief to another, I suppose. Listen, it's incredibly important. You talked about the talk to somebody, speak up, use the resources available. I remember something at the FBI Academy when going through a psychologist course there that came up, and they were talking about suicide. And the word is, ask somebody straight out. If that's the case, if you have that feeling, if it's family or something, ask them straight out, are you considering this? You'll get the truth. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of us say, oh, that's interesting. That's really what you should do. Yeah, that's what you should do. And the studies will show you. You ask. Don't be afraid to ask. If you feel something, whether it's your partner on the street, whether it's a friend at home, whether it's in the community, wherever, something isn't sit right. If you feel somebody is a little bit off a little bit, how many times do you ask people, hey, you're a bloodshot eyes, nose, you feel all right? You okay? Right? They're limping a little bit. Hey, what happened to you? You okay? Yeah. If you feel something's off, and we're all perceptive people, when something's off, because when things happen, how many times do you hear it on the media? I knew something wasn't right. Yeah. Well, if you know something's not right, in your family or a friend, it doesn't necessarily have to be a stranger per se, but somebody you're close to, and his or her habits. When something's a little bit askew, and what you want to do is talk to them, see what's going on. And if something doesn't seem right, or if you're really getting a bad feel for it, reach out for an intervention with other people, other friends and family to assist as best you can. The worst thing you want to happen if something is not correct, not right, and you say, oh, it'll work itself out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it doesn't, and people,
a lot of times it doesn't.
And you want to have that atmosphere where people, just like the chief, be proactive.
Yeah, that was very courageous of him coming on and sharing with the world, basically. He's not a robot. He's a human being.
Correct.
And we tend to forget about that, man.
But he's also, to be proactive in that sense, makes him stronger than so many other people because he knows himself.
Yeah. Powerful, very, very powerful. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this show. Please drop us a line. We thank Chief Manny Morales, who broke from his meetings to join us. But we also thank our producer, Alex. Alex, I got to get your last name. Can you throw in your last name there? Sukis. Okay. The Millers at Miami's Community News, and all of you watching, drop us a line. Let us know what you think. This has been a show.